Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. It's not just about infidelity. It's about a man whose wife didn't want to leave him. She wanted to erase him completely. My name is Cole Marston. I'm 44 years old, and this is the story of how I turned the worst betrayal of my life into a quiet fight for truth, dignity, and my children. Cole sat alone in the low, buzzing silence of his garage office, tucked behind the suburban duplex he had bought with his wife almost a decade ago. On one of the many monitors surrounding him, a grainy, high-definition video looped endlessly. It was footage he had pulled from Evelyn's supposedly secure laptop, footage she thought she had deleted for good. She was lounging in an expensive hotel suite in downtown Denver, the glow of chandelier light dancing off her hair as she smiled up at a man Cole once called his best friend. Jasper Lane was pouring her champagne, his hand grazing her thigh in a way that no longer surprised Cole. The silence made the scene feel even more unreal, like watching the death of something sacred without hearing its final breath. Evelyn threw her head back, laughing, her fingers brushing Jasper's arm with a softness that made Cole's stomach twist. Her wrist glittered with a diamond bracelet he had never seen before, one he hadn't bought. Even without sound, he could read Jasper's lips. "A new life," he mouthed. He stared, numb. 10 years of marriage reduced to a few frames of video and one silent smile. Evelyn had always been driven, but this wasn't just ambition. This was something colder, something designed. He moved to another screen and pulled up a file he'd decrypted the night before. Text messages, hundreds of them, encrypted threads between Evelyn and Jasper, each word like a blade. One message from Jasper read, "The prenup's useless if we show he used work resources to spy. Her mom's ties will lock in full custody." But it was Evelyn's reply that hollowed Cole out. "Maya and Lucas barely even know him. He chose his work years ago. We'll help them understand that." He leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of her words settle in his chest like wet cement. He had faced betrayal before. Corporate espionage, clients who lied, coworkers who stole, but this was different. This wasn't just betrayal, this was erasure. They weren't just cheating, they were rewriting him, recasting him as the absentee father, the cold husband, the one who didn't care, when all he had ever done was care too much, sacrificed too much, for them. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the way Evelyn's message repeated in his mind, over and over like a cruel echo. "Barely know him." His gaze shifted around the garage. For the first time in a long while, he really saw it. Above him, the main house, filled with things Evelyn had chosen. Every lamp, every imported rug, every staged family portrait she had meticulously arranged. Not a single piece of it was him. Not the boy who survived 6 foster homes. Not the man who built Marston Security from nothing. Even the photos on the stairwell were hers, flawless moments frozen in time, carefully staged to look like love. Now they just looked like lies. He turned back to the screen, his jaw tightening, not with anger, but with something colder. Resolution. Anger was reactive. He wasn't built for reaction. He was built for strategy. If they wanted this to be a war, they had chosen the wrong man to cross. With steady hands, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were months of preparation, bank statements, private investigations, and records Evelyn had never bothered to notice he was gathering. She had trusted him with every financial detail, every contract. That trust, the one fragile thread she had never bothered to cut, was now the very thing that would unravel her. He laid the folder back on his desk and opened it to the first page. A glossy photo stared up at him, his own reflection dimly mirrored in its sheen. Evelyn and Jasper, side by side at a charity gala downtown, dressed to perfection. Evelyn in a floor-length emerald gown, Jasper in a tux with his arm casually resting against the small of her back. They smiled for the cameras like a couple on the cusp of something bright. Only Cole knew that behind those practice smiles, they had already begun building a future without him. For a few brief seconds, he let it wash over him. The quiet grief of losing someone who never really belonged to him at all. The ache of betrayal from a man he once would have taken a bullet for. The looming fear of what might happen to Maya and Lucas if this played out the way Evelyn intended. And then, like always, he buried it. He couldn't afford the weight of emotions. Not now. Preparation had always been his strength. It's how he survived 12 years in covert operations. It's how he built Marston Security from the ground up. And it's how he would survive this. Back in 2012, before life turned into a web of secrets and deception, Cole was still figuring out who he was without a uniform. After over a decade in military intelligence, he left behind the rigid clarity of war zones for the murkier battles of corporate risk and security. Civilian life was supposed to be quieter, simpler. But nothing about Evelyn Thorne was simple. She was magnetic from the moment they met. A rising real estate mogul in her early 30s that made everyone in the room turn their heads. Cole wasn't one to believe in fate or fireworks, but Evelyn's confidence, her ambition, and the way she looked at him like she saw more than just a soldier, that pulled him in fast. Within a year they were married. People said it was impulsive. His old squad mates warned him to be cautious. People that climb that fast rarely do it for love, one of them said. Cole had brushed it off. He thought Evelyn was different, that she saw the real him beneath the camouflage and control. 3 years later, their twins were born, Maya and Lucas. 2 tiny reasons to keep trying. For a while, it all felt like it was working. Evelyn's career took off. She became a fixture at every major real estate event from Denver to Aspen. Cole landed major clients and their house grew more polished, more picture-perfect with every passing year. On paper, they were a dream. But what Evelyn never really understood was the cost of that dream. Cole's job wasn't just meetings and spreadsheets. It was late-night flights to extract a CEO from a threat overseas. It was crawling through digital back doors to find leaks before they exploded into lawsuits. It was nights spent monitoring high-risk clients, while Evelyn smiled for socialites and closed million-dollar property deals. He told himself it was okay. She had her world and he had his. They were building something together, just in different ways. Every time he came home from a job and kissed the twins goodnight, he whispered a promise that next time he'd stay longer, be more present. But the truth was, Evelyn didn't want less work from him. She wanted more status. She thrived in the luxury his work made possible. Private dinners, exclusive galas, whispers of admiration from peers who envied her for the man she had by her side, until she stopped seeing value in who he was and started focusing on what he wasn't. The cracks didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. They came quietly. Unexplained phone calls in the middle of the night. Conversations that stopped the moment he walked in. Trips she took alone more and more often. At first, Cole turned a blind eye. He noticed the patterns, of course. His brain was trained to. But he clung to the memory of the woman who held his hand when Maya was rushed to the NICU. He needed to believe she was still in there somewhere. But by 2019, that hope was slipping through his fingers. Evelyn's warmth had turned calculated. Her time was spent with men Cole didn't know, men who spoke her language, admired her ambition, and offered her things that came without the weight of love and sacrifice. She criticized him for working too much, forgetting the life she lived was built on the very hours she resented. Still, Cole didn't walk away. He doubled down. More bedtime stories, more games of catch in the yard, more presents, even when he had nothing left to give. But every effort felt like trying to hold sand in a clenched fist, and by the end of 2020, even his closest friends started to notice. One cold Thursday evening, sitting in the corner of a quiet bar just outside Boulder, Cole finally admitted what had been gnawing at him for months. Across from his old army buddy, he stirred his drink and whispered, "I can track a moving target from 2 miles out, but I can't figure out what the hell is happening inside my own home." He didn't know then how far Evelyn was willing to go. He still believed the worst of it was behind closed doors. He hadn't realized her ambition had already crossed a threshold he never imagined she'd dare approach. The real unraveling began quietly on a rainy Sunday morning. Cole sat alone in his garage office, still in his sweatshirt from the night before, staring at public records on his laptop screen. Years of intelligence work had taught him one thing: patterns never lie. Evelyn's sudden coldness, the smugness in her voice when she spoke about custody, the interference from her family, all of it was connected. She wasn't acting alone. There was something deeper, and for the first time in weeks, Cole was ready to find it. The key came hidden in sealed family court documents, slipped to him by someone who still owed him a favor. As he scrolled through the files, his jaw clenched. The case was 13 years old, involving Evelyn's mother, Judge Carolyn Thorne, a woman with decades of influence in Colorado's judicial system. The official record stated that Carolyn had dismissed a drunk driving charge against the son of a political donor, a formality, nothing unusual on paper. But the sealed documents told the real story. The driver had been Carolyn's nephew. He had been racing through a residential neighborhood when he crashed into a family car, killing all 4 passengers, an undocumented couple and their 2 young daughters. A quiet immigrant family erased in seconds. And Carolyn, with her deep ties to city prosecutors and judges, buried the case beneath legal red tape, sealed testimony, and insufficient evidence. Cole sat motionless, the soft hum of the garage fan the only sound in the room. This wasn't just a mistake. It was corruption so deep it had rewritten history. Evelyn had always admired her mother's power. Now that power was a weapon, a loaded gun he could turn if needed. But Cole wasn't done. For 2 weeks, he buried himself in records, data, timelines. He traced campaign contributions and cross-referenced financial statements. Gregory Thorne, Evelyn's father, had quietly funneled funds to the district attorney's re-election campaign just days after the case was sealed. He followed the money, the photos, the dates, building a case layer by layer. The Thorne family had spent years polishing their image, pillars of integrity and philanthropy, but Cole had the evidence to burn it all down. Still, he moved with caution. This wasn't about rage or revenge. He knew leverage meant nothing if it was sloppy, so he checked every detail twice, every timestamp on every photo, every financial transfer cross-verified through independent channels. He wasn't going to make a single mistake. And by the time he was finished, the file was thick, airtight, and devastating. One call to the right reporter or federal investigator could dismantle the entire Thorne legacy. But Cole didn't make that call, not yet. He didn't want to destroy Evelyn publicly. That would be too easy. What he wanted was control, not chaos. So he waited. And it didn't take long. Just a week later, Cole found himself seated across from Marcus Devlin, one of Denver's most expensive family attorneys, the kind of man who always looked like he was smelling something sour. With a practiced smirk, Marcus slid a thick stack of documents across the polished conference table. He said, "Sign these. Evelyn keeps the kids, the house, the vehicles, most of your business profits. This is the cleanest way forward. If you fight it, we'll litigate and you'll lose." Cole didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He picked up the papers, scanned them, and set them down like yesterday's junk mail. His calm unsettled Marcus, who leaned back slightly, waiting for some reaction that never came. Instead, Cole reached into his leather folder and placed a single envelope on the table. He said, "Deliver this to your client." Marcus hesitated. "What is it?" Cole's voice was quiet, steady. "Just make sure she reads it before she pushes this any further." Inside that envelope was everything. The sealed court files, photos of Carolyn meeting the DA privately, the trail of Gregory's money. The message was clear. If Evelyn turned this into a war, Cole would end their family's legacy with the truth. Cole stood slowly, gathering his things without saying another word. His silence filled the room like a storm cloud, heavy and inescapable. Marcus Devlin watched him leave with a stiffness in his jaw, his eyes fixed on the envelope Cole had placed on the table, as if opening it might set off something irreversible. Maybe it already had. As Cole stepped out into the dim hallway of the downtown law office, the air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but shifted. For the first time in months, he wasn't the one being cornered. Evelyn thought she had orchestrated every piece of this game, but now she would have to account for the storm he had quietly, methodically set in motion. The first call came just after midnight. Cole was in his garage office again, the soft hum of his laptop the only sound in the still house. Evelyn's name lit up his phone screen. He let it ring out. Then again, seconds later. This time it was Jasper's name flashing. Evelyn's brother, her muscle, the man who always acted like he had the final say. Cole ignored that one, too. Less than 5 minutes later, the third call came. The name on the screen made his jaw tighten. Caroline Thorne. He answered. "What do you want?" he asked, voice flat. There was a pause. When she spoke, her voice was sharp but unsteady, like someone trying to hold a mask that was beginning to crack. "You think you can threaten me with half-baked accusations?" she snapped. "They're not accusations," Cole said. "They're court records, transfers, photos. You spent years burying the Moretti family under sealed files and legal spin, but the truth still exists, and now I have it." There was another pause. When Caroline spoke again, her voice had shifted, no longer defensive, but careful, almost pleading. "What do you want, Cole?" He didn't hesitate. "Evelyn pulls the divorce petition. She signs over full custody of Maya and Lucas to me. Jasper sells his share of Marston security back to me at the original valuation, none of the inflated garbage he's been pushing. And you resign from the bench, quietly, before federal investigators force your hand." She scoffed, but there was fear beneath it. "You're bluffing." "You already know I'm not." He hung up, leaving her in silence. By the next morning, the first cracks in the Thorne family's well-built armor were already beginning to show. Cole hadn't sent direct threats. He didn't need to. What he did was more subtle, more dangerous. A carefully worded anonymous tip had landed in the inboxes of 3 seasoned investigative reporters, each hinting at a long-buried case involving judicial misconduct. And a redacted version of Caroline's financial records had found its way to a contact Cole still had at the federal prosecutor's office. It wasn't enough to break everything, not yet, but it was more than enough to rattle the family's foundation. Jasper was the first to lose control. By mid-afternoon, Cole found a voicemail on his phone. The voice on the recording was raw, panicked, accusing Cole of destroying their family and threatening retaliation. An hour later, another message came, this one pleading for a meeting, a conversation, something. Cole didn't respond. Evelyn showed up that evening, no warning, no appointment. She walked into his office wearing a designer coat that hung awkwardly on her shoulders, as if she'd been too distracted to dress herself properly. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and her voice, once so composed, cracked. "You're ruining us," she said, trying to summon anger, but the fear was unmistakable. "Do you even care what this is doing to Maya and Lucas?" Cole looked at her for a long, still moment before answering. "I care more than anyone in your family ever has. That's why I'm doing this." She didn't have a response. And by that night, the whispers had started to turn into questions. Local media hinted at judicial impropriety involving a long-respected judge. Internet forums buzzed with speculation, and for the first time in over 2 decades, Caroline Thorne didn't show up to court. She knew the clock was running out. A few days later, Cole sat once again across from Evelyn, this time in Marcus Devlin's office. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like a second ceiling. Evelyn sat rigid, her fingers trembling around the pen she refused to lift. In front of her, a stack of documents waited: custody terms, business transfers, asset settlements. She was losing everything she had clawed so hard to keep. Marcus, once smug and condescending, now looked pale and absent, his eyes fixed on the documents like they might turn into smoke. Cole sat across from them, still and composed. "Are we doing this or not?" he asked softly, his voice calm but edged with finality. Evelyn glared at him, but the fight in her eyes was gone. Her mother hadn't spoken since Cole's call. Jasper hadn't shown up. Investigators were asking questions. The walls were closing in. She lowered her eyes and picked up the pen, and with a shaky breath, she signed the first page. Cole hadn't done much, but she knew hadn't been needed. As for Jasper, he hadn't even shown up, and by then, federal investigators had begun quietly circling the Thorne family's finances. Every advantage Evelyn thought she had so carefully constructed, every backup plan, every ounce of control, was gone. Her shoulders sagged as she lowered her eyes and signed her name, first on the custody agreement, then the business transfer, and finally the property settlement. One signature at a time, the empire she had spent years trying to build began to crumble beneath her own hand. When she was finished, she slid the documents across the table. "You win," she muttered bitterly. But Cole didn't move to take them. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes unreadable. "No, Evelyn, this was never about winning. This was about truth." He let that hang in the air for a moment, before continuing, his voice soft but firm. "So before we finish, you're going to tell me, why? Why did you do all of this?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. She didn't speak. Marcus Devlin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly sensing the turn this was about to take. Cole waited, silent, unmoving. Finally, Evelyn slammed the pen on the table and snapped. "You want the truth? Fine. You were never enough for me. I married you because you were useful, because you had money, because your company opened doors, because people respected your name. But you were just a glorified watchdog with a clean haircut. I outgrew you years ago." Cole listened without flinching. Not a single reaction passed his face. When she finished, he gave her a slow, tired nod. "And yet here you are, signing away everything you ever wanted?" Her face went pale. The flush of anger she had tried to cling to drained into something closer to fear. Her breathing turned shallow, uneven. Cole gathered the documents, slid them into his folder, and paused. From the same case, he pulled out another envelope and set it gently in front of her. Evelyn stared at it, unsure. "What is this?" she asked, voice no longer sharp, just wary. "Consider it a gift," Cole said quietly. She opened it with hesitant fingers. The first photograph made her freeze. The second showed him withdrawing stacks of cash from a Cayman Islands bank, an account that bore both of their names. The third was a high-resolution image of him reclining on the deck of a yacht, sunglasses on, champagne raised toward the camera, already celebrating his escape. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the images. Her voice broke when she finally spoke. This isn't real." "It's real," Cole replied, steady and cold. "He emptied the accounts 2 days ago. Everything he promised you, gone. By now he's probably in Monaco or somewhere else far enough to disappear." And just like that, Evelyn's composure shattered. Her hands covered her face as the weight of it all hit. Her shoulders shook. A low, muffled sob escaped her lips, small at first, then rising with every breath she failed to control. The room went silent. Marcus looked away, shifting awkwardly in his seat as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Cole didn't move. He watched her for a moment longer, then stood, slipping the folder under his arm. Without turning back, he said one last thing. "You wanted power, Evelyn. Now you have nothing left to fight for." And then he left her there, surrounded by silence, signed agreements, and the crushing weight of her own choices. The reckoning came quicker than Cole expected. Within a week of Evelyn surrendering custody and control of the business, Caroline Thorne announced her retirement from the bench. Her public statement cited health concerns, but everyone who had seen the leaked court records knew the truth. The Moretti case was no longer a secret. News outlets ran headlines hinting at cover-ups, and the name Thorne no longer carried the same quiet power it once had. Gregory Thorne's hotel empire was next. Armed with Cole's meticulously compiled evidence, federal agents began freezing accounts. Whispers of campaign finance violations and money laundering swept through the business world. Investors fled. Lawsuits from the Moretti family began landing like hammers. What once seemed untouchable was collapsing. One press release, one court motion, one headline at a time. Cole had said nothing to the media. He didn't need to. The truth had found its own voice and its own justice. As for Evelyn, her downfall was quieter but no less complete. With the divorce petition withdrawn and custody handed over, she was left with little more than her name, and even that meant less now, especially after Jasper drained their last shared account and disappeared without a word. Within a few months, Evelyn's world crumbled in silence. She sold her luxury car first, then the art she once bragged about sourcing from Europe. Eventually, even the last of her personal investments were liquidated just to stay afloat. The invitations to high-end galas disappeared. The brunches with Denver's elite stopped. Calls that once came hourly never came at all. She took a job at a modest suburban real estate office, far from the spotlight she used to chase. No more penthouse listings or magazine features, just open houses in quiet neighborhoods and commission-based earnings that came sporadically. Occasionally, Cole would hear something through mutual contacts. They said she was polite now, humbled maybe. But pride still clung to her posture like a coat she couldn't quite take off. And for the first time in over a decade, Evelyn Thorne had no real power left to wield. She lived at the edges now, far from the center she had once sacrificed everything to dominate. Jasper, though, didn't get to vanish quietly. Cole made sure of that. Through a few remaining contacts from his time in military intelligence, he shared everything: offshore accounts, forged documents, hidden wire transfers. Within weeks, Jasper's assets were frozen and his name appeared on an international watch list. He ran, country to country, visa to visa, but each move only narrowed his options. The woman he had fled with left him the moment his money dried up. By the time the media picked up the trail, Jasper Thorne was labeled a fugitive, living in temporary rentals under different names, his entire identity reduced to shadows. His career, his social standing, his influence, gone. And Cole? He didn't celebrate. He sat alone some nights in his office, looking out over the backyard, thinking about how easily he could have let hatred guide him, how simple it would have been to scorch the earth out of anger. But this was never about destruction. It was about consequence, about drawing a line between justice and vengeance, and choosing the quieter path. The Thorns had built a dynasty out of manipulation, but in the end, they were undone by truth. 3 months later, the world felt different. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Cole leaned against the railing of his porch in Longmont, watching Maya and Lucas chase each other across the backyard. Their laughter rose into the late spring air, bright, innocent, and unburdened. It was a sound he hadn't heard in too long. They didn't know about sealed court documents or backroom deals. They didn't know how close they came to losing everything. All they knew was that their father had stood for them, and that was enough. Maya shrieked with joy as Lucas caught her in a hug. Cole smiled, something steady settling into his chest. This was what he had fought for. Not revenge, not control, just this: peace. Marston's security was thriving again. Clients who had once hesitated to return his calls now lined up, eager to work with someone whose name had survived scandal and emerged stronger. He had built a new team, men and women he trusted. But he didn't bury himself in work like before. His nights were for family dinners now, for science projects and piano recitals, for teaching Lucas how to throw a curveball, for being present. Inside his office, a single photograph still sat on a shelf. It was of Evelyn, taken years ago when they were still a family. He didn't keep it out of longing or sentiment. He kept it as a reminder that trust isn't a gift, it's a choice, a responsibility, and once broken, it changes everything. As the sun sank low behind the mountains, Cole stepped down from the porch and walked into the yard. Lucas tossed the baseball. Cole caught it without flinching. Maya cheered. For the first time in years, he felt the ground beneath him was solid. His life wasn't perfect, but it was his, built not on illusion, but on sacrifice, truth, and a quiet will to protect what mattered most. Some betrayals try to take everything from you, but sometimes they leave you with exactly what you need. Betrayal doesn't always come with sirens or shattered windows. It often creeps in quietly under the disguise of love, success, and trust. Cole's story is a haunting reflection of what happens when manipulation replaces honesty and control masquerades as affection. And while not everyone will face such a complex unraveling, many know the ache of being used, of watching something they built be taken from them piece by piece. In today's world, protecting yourself emotionally, legally, and financially has never been more important. Don't ignore red flags in relationships, dismissive behavior, secrecy, or persistent emotional withdrawal. These can signal deeper issues that, left unspoken, become cracks in the foundation. Learn your worth, maintain your independence, keep records, know your rights, and never feel guilty for asking hard questions. Trust should be earned and never blindly given. Healing from betrayal takes time, and it doesn't always come with closure, but it can come with clarity. Sometimes, like Cole, you'll find strength not in destroying what broke you, but in choosing something better for yourself and those you love.